We are finally, you know how when we first started this area of Mark, we hit the triumphal entry right on Palm Sunday. It was awesome, and I thought, okay, cool. Well, guess what? We're just now today at the Last Supper. So, we're moving a little slower than Mark might have thought. So we're in Mark 14, verses 12 to 26. And I titled this, A Night to Remember, and it was really a night to remember. So let me ask you the question, how can we ensure that certain important events will always be remembered in our lives? How can we be sure that each generation will be instructed concerning the importance of that event? It can be 9/11. I mean, we have it as a National Day of Remembrance, so we know. I think what we really don't, the TV does, I guess, but what we don't know, or what we should do, is to instruct our kids and our grandkids, do you know what 9/11 was all about? And then if they say they do, then ask them to explain in their mind what that was, so that you get an idea of whether they have a mistaken idea or whether it's the real deal. Because it's just as it's not. I mean, it's a holiday and it's oh yeah, 9/11, but it's more important that they understand why we're not celebrating it like it's a wonderful thing, and so we're remembering it. It's a Memorial Day, right? It's a day of remembrance.
Observance.
Yes, exactly. We don't want these days to become just another holiday or a day off from work. This is why it's crucial to remember these important days each year while reminding everyone of the meaning of that day. So when we just had Memorial Day and before, and we had Veterans Day, with so many, it's hard for me to say this because I really don't know the numbers, but it used to be one of the first things that guys did when they got out of high school was to join the military. Now I don't know if it certainly in time of war. Believe me, during World War II, people were joining by the droves because they wanted to go fight the enemy, and I don't know what it was. I don't know. It would be interesting to see what the statistical information is on that. But we want to take the time to teach the young people to always remember the reason why we remember these particular days, whatever they happen to be, Memorial Day and so on. If we don't do that, then soon there will be no trace left of these important times in our history. They'll be gone. That is what that cancel culture is all about, by the way. That's what they're trying to do, is cancel part of our culture. When you start tearing down statues of George Washington and whatever, and believe me, they would love to get Lincoln, I'm sure, if they could. I think it's just, in fact, I'm very surprised they haven't tried to blow it up. That canceling of what's important in our history of our country is a huge, huge mistake. It was one of these special days of remembrance that Jesus and his disciples were anticipating eating the Passover meal. It signaled the beginning of a 7-day celebration known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Unleavened bread means leaven is yeast, so it was bread made without yeast, because in the days of the actual Passover, they were instructed, make bread without yeast, have your clothes on, have your staff in your hand, your roasted lamb and your bitter herbs to remind you of the bitterness of the time you spent in Egypt, and also the unleavened bread to show that you had to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. As soon as the word came to we're out of here, then you had to be ready to go. It's also very interesting, and I don't hear too many people mentioning this, because this is the original reason for the celebration of the Passover meal, was that anybody who wanted to be saved from the wrath of God, even if they were not Jewish, if they were friends, if they were Egyptians or Arabs or whatever they were, and they were living in or staying, not so much living in, although I guess that's possible, but they could stay in the home of the Jewish family and be protected, because they weren't being protected because of their nationality. They were being protected because of that stuff they took and put around the doorposts in the lintel, which is the head part, and then the other lintel. What was that they put on there? Lamb's blood. You were preparing the lamb, of course, to eat for the meal, a roasted lamb, and so you took some hyssop, which we would just look at as being like weeds, and make it like a brush and dip it in the blood and put it on there. And if you did that, it was, think of the significance of this. It was the blood of the lamb that saved the people from being annihilated by the death angel as the angel passed through the city. So it was, obviously we're saved by the blood of the lamb now. They had no clue what this was all about. All they knew was they were told to do this, and they did it because they wanted to live. So so today they have Passover meals, and they leave a chair at the table vacant for Elijah, because Elijah is supposed to come back before the Messiah comes, and the Jews don't think that the Messiah has come, so they have an empty chair for Elijah. And so they have their celebration. So the Passover is a big deal. It isn't just the Jewish version of Christmas. Believe me, that is the last thing they think it is. It is definitely a Jewish observance. So, we know the Passover meal as the Last Supper, or sometimes it's called the Lord's Supper. We celebrate it here once a month, and we remind ourselves. That's what we're doing. We're reminding ourselves of what Jesus has done, and how he died so that we could have life. So let's see where we're at here. We're in 14, 12. Now I've got to put on the cheaters. I don't know, I guess people just didn't see before they invented glasses. On the first day, verse 12, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, okay, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" Okay, so he sent two of his disciples, which we find out in some of the other accounts. It was John and Peter. He sent two of them, and this is what he said: "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him." Now, I don't know if you know much about the culture of, well, it's not even those countries. It's the culture in India is the same way. The woman carries the water.
Very unusual to see a man with a pitcher of water.
The woman goes down to the. I watched, which was totally to me was very biblical. I watched the woman go to a well, which was off the ground about this far to keep runoff from. Well, the well was so shallow it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But and she lowered the well. In fact, the water was so low that she tied a bunch of scarves together because the rope wasn't long enough. And she lowered down this, I can't remember what kind of container it was, to draw the water out. And when the water would come up, she would pour it into, to me, they look like spittoons. You know, it's just about the same shape. And would draw the water from the well. And how can you know anything about the story of the Bible and see that and not think of the woman at the well? And that's exactly what was going on. So you're going to see this man, and right, you see a man carrying water, he's going to stand out in the crowd. He's going to stand out in the crowd. Okay, so let's see here. Follow him. You're going to see this man. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house, he enters. Now this is kind of interesting. I don't know how literal we can make all of this, but he's following the man carrying the water, which I don't believe is going to be the owner of the house. It's going to be his servant that he's going to send to get the water. But he says, when you see the man carrying the water, follow him to the house, and then say to the owner of the house, he enters. The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there. I used to wonder about this a little bit, and again, sometimes when you read kind of extra biblical information, you're not really sure how much of that to trust. But what I had read, and I'll just put it that way, what I had read was that it was the custom that if there was somebody that needed a place to celebrate the Passover, then you had a place that was vacant, that it was your cultural responsibility to offer that to them, to do that. So once again, take it for what it's worth. It would certainly help explain a little bit about this. Verse 16, the disciples left, they went into the city, and they found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said something very, very important. And very, let me set the scene and say that the Passover was a time of celebration. It was not a time to mourn. It was a time of gladness because of the way the Lord had been so faithful. And so here's, you can kind of get the idea that they're pretty pleased, pretty happy. They're in a jovial frame of mind. And so listen to what Jesus drops a bomb on. So while they were reclining at the table, this is what he says. I tell you the truth. Very, very, very popular way that Jesus spoke. One of you will betray me. One who is eating with me. Well, let's see, there's 12. They were saddened, verse 19. And one by one they said to him, surely not I. Surely not I, Lord. Surely you don't mean I'm going to do this. It is one of the 12, he replied, the one who dips bread into the bowl with me. Now, I don't know. It seems awfully difficult for me to believe that all the 12 hear him say that, because if they did, what would you be doing? You'd be watching the master's hand to see when he was going to dip his bread or his meat. Sometimes they would take the meat and wrap it in the bread a little bit and dip it in the sauce, the secret sauce. And they'd put it into the sauce. They'd be waiting to see whose hand went in there with them. So, I don't know. I
think he had already had his hand in there. Judas.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, that's a possibility too. Yeah, that's right. Yep. Verse 21. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. In other words, these events are gonna happen, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's going to happen just as it is written. It's going to happen. But woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. I think I'd agree with that. I think that it would have been better. We know that Judas had we can speculate all we want about it, but there was a time when he like the 12, the other 11 had followed Jesus, had seen the miracles being done. He had witnessed the words of compassion that he had shown to the people. He had been on the boat when Jesus walked across the Sea of Galilee, walking on the water, and had Peter come out to meet him. He'd seen all of that. But remember, what were the Jews expecting from their Messiah?
A conquering hero.
They wanted to see this Messiah come. I think if you were to ask, could have asked them, before all this happened, before Jesus even came on the scene, they would probably say, well, I can imagine we would see him come in riding on a white horse and just crown on his head. He's going to make everything, all the wrongs right. He's going to conquer our enemies, which in that case was Rome. And it wasn't just Rome, but Rome was the biggie. But when you see him doing things that were leading in the direction of him being arrested and executed, I know that everybody doubted. We've been told that. Everybody, the verse, strike the shepherd and the flock will flee. will scatter rather. Here's Jesus in that situation, and Judas, at some point, we know that it was a lot of it was all about the money for him.
Yeah.
He was the treasurer. He carried the money bag. They needed to go purchase something for everyone, bread or whatever it was. He would be the one that would take care of it. But the scripture always said that he was in charge of the money bag, and he would help himself to the money whenever he wanted. So there's something amiss with Judas, and I'm not sure. We don't know. We have no idea. We have no idea. Verse 22. While they were eating, and here's the part we're familiar with, Jesus took bread, he gave thanks, and he broke it, and he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it. This is my body." Then he took the cup. He gave thanks and offered it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." Covenants, agreements, even when it was between two warring tribes, and they didn't want to continue the warfare. They didn't want to continue having people die, and so they said, "Let's make a covenant. Let's make an agreement between the two of us. Then I won't attack you, and you won't attack me." And maybe it even went further than that. Maybe it had to do with the land that they were on, whatever. But there would be a mixing of the blood. I don't remember the old Indian movies where they would take their knife and make their palm of their hand bleed, and the other person would do that, and they would grip their hands together, and there would be this mixing, a blood oath type of thing. When there's a covenant, there has to be blood involved. It's the seriousness of the oath. And in this case, this is a new covenant, which means there had been the old covenant. Because remember, up to this time, all of these people that are his 12 are all Jews. They're all have a kinship to Abraham, their earthly father. And because they were partakers of the covenant that God made with Abraham, because Abraham was promised, you and your descendants, you and your seed, will prosper, and I'm going to give you this land, and it's going to be something that you're going to always inherit from generation to generation. And it did get passed on. That same covenant got passed on to Isaac, and then it got passed on to Jacob and to Esau. It was a thing of a reminder of this is continuing. It was a covenant. Now Jesus is talking about a new covenant, which I don't think they have a clue. We look at it as an evidence that we can look back at and say, okay, this is when this covenant is going to have to do with the shedding of his blood, because he said, this wine, my blood of the new covenant. And that new covenant wasn't just for the Jews, although I'm sure they would like to have thought that What happens when you have a new covenant, a new agreement? Let's say you make a contract with somebody. Oh, it's the same as true if you make a will. And you say, here is the covenant or the will that I have made. Here it is. And so but later on in your life you decide, oh, okay, things have changed, and I wanna change that will. Now I'm not going to leave everything to my son and daughter or wherever. Somebody's fallen out of favor maybe, and so you're gonna change that will. Now the latest will is the one that is the one that the attorneys would look at and say, okay, this is the last. How do they word it? This is the last will and testament. Old Testament, New Testament, you see where all those words are coming from? This is the last one that this person put together. It's the one that is the one we're going to follow. The other one, if there were 9 of them before that, they're all void. They're all void. It's the latest one. As long as that person was alive when they made it, and as long as they can meet the challenge, right? The challenge of showing that, yes, this person really did sign it and so forth. So it is this new covenant that Jesus is making that is going to take precedent over the old covenant. So when people say, oh, I'm just following the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, then you're not understanding. You're really not understanding. Don't you know there's been a new covenant? Don't you know that the Old Covenant is done away with? Not because it wasn't any good, but because now there is a better covenant, a newer covenant. And this new covenant has to do with all of the people of the world, not just the Jews. Because the old covenant was specifically for the people of Israel. Even though that's not exactly how God intended it to be. But right? God wanted his people to be a watchtower, a lighthouse on a hill that was beaming out the truth to the rest of the world so that they would see. Remember how we read the Psalms about proclaim, extol God forever, proclaim his mighty deeds. This is what the Jews were supposed to be doing to the rest of the Gentile world. They weren't supposed to be, you're not supposed to intermarry with them. I understand that. But you're not supposed to just shut up about God to them. You're not supposed to say, well, you're born a sinner, so good luck. No, that's not at all what God had in mind. So here we are now, having this Passover meal. And he's in this Passover meal is so different than all of the rest of the Passover meals that had ever been celebrated. Because this is the first time that anything is mentioned about a new covenant. So it makes you, if you're Jewish, you kind of have to ask yourself, why are they talking about this in the way that they're talking about it? Why are they talking about a new covenant? I didn't know there was a new covenant. And why is it that you're saying that this is what Jesus talked about at the Passover meal? I have no idea. It was, by the way, in Matthew's Gospel that that he speaks of. He speaks and says that this is kind of interesting too. This you could look this up if you wanted to. In chapter 26, verse 25, Judas comments, like the rest of them were commenting, "Surely not I. Surely not I'm not the one that's going to betray you." Then Jesus answers him, and he says, "Yes, it is you." He's speaking to Judas. He's probably speaking softly to him. It is I think the sadness that must have been in Jesus, the heart of Jesus, when he had to say to Judas, "You're the one that's going to do this."
So it's going to do what you were going to do.
Mm-hmm. This can't be avoided, and I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. What you have to do it quickly.
Put your in with a kiss.
Yeah. And then in verse 25, this is kind of interesting in light of an understanding of what the kingdom of God is going to be like. Verse 25, "I tell you the truth, I will not drink again of the fruit of the wine, until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." It's up to you whether you think there's going to be a literal kingdom on earth. That's just what I happen to believe. And Jesus will rule and reign for 1,000 years on this earth. And he will be in Jerusalem, sitting on his throne. And all the world will come and bow at his feet. When they say every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So there's going to be that time. So he says, I'll drink it again. I'm not going to be drinking any wine until that happens. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and remember that's where we speak our hymn. But first, Jesus must be betrayed into the hands of sinful man. Now remember the events, this circle of, not the circle, but the way the events unfold is, there was, by the way, a lot more things that happened at the Passover meal than just this. Washing of the feet. There were a lot of other things that were said. But then after they sang their hymn, they went out, as was their usual thing, to go to the Garden of Gethsemane. I have to say that slowly because that's really hard to say fast. So, their favorite place to meet. It would be, and this is all unfolding. Imagine yourself that you're one of these followers of Jesus. You don't know what's going to happen next. Oh, we're going to the garden. Oh, okay, yeah, all right. Well, that's what we normally do. But, geez, everything up till now has been crazy. He says somebody's going to betray him. He says that we're going to suffer. at the hands of the religious leaders. We're going to be tried and flogged, and we're going to go through all of this for your sake, for your name's sake. And now, the usual jovial, happy occasion of the Passover now has been forever changed. So this will definitely be a night for all mankind to remember. It's the beginning. It's the